You're watching The New Stack Makers, a podcast for people who develop, deploy, and manage at-scale software. For more conversations and articles, please visit thenewstack.io. Now on with the show.
Spot by NetApp enables cloud operations teams to deliver scalability, performance, and security for cloud infrastructure and applications at the lowest possible cost through continuous automation and optimization combined with deep visibility and governance. Learn more at spot.io.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the New Stack Makers podcast. I'm Heather Joslin, features editor of the New Stack, and today we're going to be talking about cloud ops, which is, in this case, stands for cloud operations. What does it mean to be an ops engineer in a time when your network might be distributed on a cloud or several clouds or clouds and on-prem or clouds on-prem and the edge? The possibilities are endless. And how are large organizations thinking about ops and changing their thinking to align with the needs of cloud native? We're joined today by Mekka Williams, principal engineer of Spot by NetApp. Hi, Mekka.
Hi, great to be with you.
It's great to have you. Mekka, can you tell us a little bit about Spot by NetApp and what you do there?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a bit of a veteran here at NetApp. I just celebrated 16 years. I've been around a little while. And for those that don't know, NetApp is a 30-year veteran in data management services, providing data management services. And, our traditional solutions are for on-premises data centers and the like. And we've, in recent years, been expanding that portfolio so that rich history and that expertise that we've built up in storage efficiency and high-performing storage solutions, and bringing that into cloud environments. And so Spot by NetApp is part of our portfolio that's focused on helping folks be really lean and efficient in the cloud, both with resource utilization and cost, and really responding to more modern applications. So I'm very excited about the acquisition and where we're headed.
We've got one more thing before we get started in our conversation. Our conversation today, this episode is brought to you sponsored by Spot by NetApp. So let's jump in. It's a big topic. Let's start with a fundamental question. What are some of the biggest ways in which operations is different when your applications are running on the cloud?
So, of course, it depends on the architecture of your application. And there are so many things that can be different. But, the cloud is this consumption-based resource. It's shared. And while it's important to understand your application needs, no matter where it runs, it's increasingly important in the cloud. You really have to understand at a granular level, what resources your application needs, how it responds to changes in the environment, because this is a governing factor in how reliable and performant your application is. And in addition, the cloud's attack surface is completely different, and it could be more complex in some cases. So you really have to be mindful of the solutions you put in place to secure your application and all the proximal data.
What would you say are the components of a cloud ops organization?
So if you think about DevOps as a culture, and I don't want to be too preachy here, but, this culture of being lean and collaborative and breaking down silos and being really efficient, it's kind of applying that culture all across all of the operations that are required to operate it in the cloud. So you have things like FinOps, making sure you have a good financial strategy. DevOps proper, right? Making sure your software supply chain is intact. SecOps, data ops, like all of these operations being really lean with your process and tasks that you need to operate in the cloud efficiently.
It might also be good for us to sort of go back just a little bit. I've heard so many different definitions of DevOps. How would you describe? What is your What is DevOps, Mekka?
Oh gosh, yeah, this is a great question. I love this. So let's see. My definition is kind of wordy. I'll be concise, but it really is this culture of collaboration, this shared responsibility across all the teams that are involved from the planning phase to the deployment phase for getting, these teams working together with the shared goal of getting increased value and with high quality to the customer, right? So these processes, this tearing down of silos, this really working together, but being efficient as possible. And I always like to add a little bit of seasoning of continuously improving, continuously learning as you iterate through each cycle of providing that software.
Yeah, sort of a feedback loop of what's working and what isn't, and continue to iterate. What might be some of the challenges if you're running on, in the intro I talked about, a lot of people are running on multiple clouds or hybrid situations. What are some of the challenges, particularly from an ops point of view?
Multi-cloud and even hybrid cloud, all of these platforms have a set of APIs and tools that are advertised to help you streamline processes and operations that you may need to perform in order to run your application or workload. And when you run in a heterogeneous environment, sometimes you incur technical debt trying to automate and standardize your processes, because there are some custom APIs and abstraction layers that can help you do this, or sometimes organizations may develop their own and then they incur this technical debt. So the complexities increase as you add different platforms to your overall data center or your environment. And so that can be increasingly complicated. And then each different surface is a different attack surface again. So really managing and being able to standardize these processes across those environments can be challenging.
A lot of these organizations are running on Kubernetes. They have containerized microservices. What role does that play in cloud ops?
Well, containers in general and Kubernetes have done a ton in the way of helping developers and businesses deliver content and fixes and enhancements to their end users more quickly. I mean, it's basically revolutionized DevOps, right? We've had to really define and get clean with DevOps in order to keep up with the pace of content delivery enabled by containerization and Kubernetes. And Kubernetes is the de facto platform for cloud native development. I mean, it's everywhere. But we know that most of the containerized applications running in Kubernetes clusters are running underutilized, right? And anything that's underutilized in the cloud equates to waste. And if we want to be really lean and clean and utilize resources in a very efficient manner, we have to have really good cloud ops strategy in order to do that. So understanding, again, what your application needs and being really efficient in running and operating.
I want to talk a little later in our conversation about cost optimization, but what can you tell me about the role that automation should play in this in a cloud ops organization?
Well, I used to do DevOps exclusively for a living, and I feel like automation is the lifeblood of all operations. We should automate everything.
Automate all the things.
Automate all the things. Exactly. But, we have the perspective that automation helps teams be more efficient. The less tasks that your workforce have to perform manually, the more time they have to spend focused on business logic and being innovative. And then automation also helps you with repeatability, and it's less error prone, and it helps you standardize. Really good automation simplifies your environment greatly. Yes, it's really true. Automate all the things.
Also, my understanding is that there's a role that automation plays in just making, your engineers and your developers happier, because they're not having to do a lot of repetitive tasks and I mean, is that a sort of secondary benefit in terms of automating things, using automation heavily in your operations? And
Absolutely. I believe that's true. I think I read somewhere about, over the course of the pandemic, it was observed that DevOps and SREs were burning out faster than anybody else, right? So anything that can be done to help make their lives easier. And yes, if something is repeatable, if something is required to be repeatable, both to make your processes more efficient, but also to make those DevOps and SREs lives easier, it absolutely should be automated.
I've also heard, I mean, I sort of said in the intro too that in this case, cloud ops refers to cloud operations, but it also can refer to cloud optimization. How do you define that, and how does that overlap with, say, site reliability engineering?
Cloud optimization, I think, is crucial to being successful with cloud ops. Like, this should be the goal of your cloud ops strategy. Again, with the focus of our Spot by NetApp portfolio as a good example, like we want you to be as successful and get the most out of your cloud wherever you are. And so part of that strategy is making sure you're running with the right instance types, right? Or that you are mindful of any waste, that you and that you continue this process, that you continually optimize and try to be leaner and more efficient, each time you iterate through your workflow. And so, optimization is, I think, is the end goal, is always the goal of any good cloud ops strategy. And this regular evaluation of how am I getting as much? Am I as good as I can be? Cloud continually innovates too. So there's always more and new opportunity to optimize. And I think cloud optimization is a complement to SRE. Right. SRE work tends to take a software approach to the operationalization of, what's required to keep services up and running with high quality. So, good and strategic cloud ops that's resulting in good cloud optimization, again, makes SRE's lives easier.
What can you tell me about what your organization has learned from its customers and how they're thinking about cloud ops?
So I think we observed a big rush to the cloud especially with the pandemic when everybody went home, right? So where migration, I think, was the initial strategy, just get there, and utilize cloud infrastructure. I think we're seeing customers kind of revisit and start to look at ways to make better use of the cloud. So these strategies are being updated where it didn't make sense to go, lift and shift to the cloud. Maybe it was monolithic applications. Maybe it was just, for convenience to get there faster. They may have just moved processes and applications maybe too hastily. And now they're revisiting. So, we see some organizations that are trying to modernize their applications further to make better use of the services that are available in the cloud. The cloud is getting more complex as they grow and mature in their journey. And so they're looking for ways to simplify their operations. And as always, keep their costs down, keep things simple for their DevOps and SREs, not incur, additional technical debt, but still make the best use out of their cloud wherever they are.
We definitely heard about companies, organizations moving to the cloud during the pandemic because, as you said, everybody went home. What were you seeing as some of the most common mistakes people were making in terms of operations when they rushed to the cloud?
So I think this shift from CapEx to OpEx really caught people. I know it caught me in my old DevOps work. So not really understanding steady state, sunny day, what that cost looked like, what that resource utilization looked like. And so they really didn't have a baseline. And so those first cloud bills, I'm sure, were shocking because you don't get a cloud bill when you run on your on-premises environment or even your private cloud where you've already paid the cost for the infrastructure that you're using. Now, if you take those same processes and applications and workloads and you throw them in the cloud, well, you're getting charged and you go without any strategy and you're using on-demand, you have an on-demand consumption model and you're getting charged by the minute or by the usage. That's the sticker shock, I think, was a big deal. I think that was the reason why a lot of folks, decided to go back and reevaluate. The strategy, the cloud ops strategy is so important when you make that move to make sure you don't waste money. And honestly, good cloud ops strategy, if you plan properly, that's going to benefit you even on premises. So how we get lean and really efficient, and practice good hygiene, data hygiene, and all those things, the security, all of that can benefit you on premises and anywhere you run your applications and workloads.
What do you mean by data hygiene? Good data hygiene.
Oh,
what's an example
good
of
data
that?
hygiene, right? So, making sure you're using the right tier of data, making sure you're not over provisioned in the type of storage you need. You don't need to pay top dollar for high performing storage if it's just backup data that doesn't get access that often. Don't have hot storage provision for cold data. Understand what your data heat map looks like and where it needs to be the most efficient. Should you be using caches? These are all strategies that you should evaluate and understand your application needs. These are good to know on premises, but these are imperative to know when you're in the cloud. And don't waste, right? If data can be, if you can use storage efficiencies to reduce your data footprint, you should do that, right? These are all things that keep your costs down and keep you actually, keep you more green because you'll use less greenhouse gases the smaller your data footprint. And this is all good stuff to do.
Yeah. How does Spot by NetApp tackle cloud ops? Both definitions, operations and optimization.
So Spot by NetApp has really leaned into the cloud. I mean, we have a robust portfolio of cloud ops solutions with Spot at its core. So everything from automated cost optimization with using AI, machine learning algorithms to choose to make compute selection for you, to the automation of Kubernetes management, to load balancing the infrastructure used by your Kubernetes clusters. We have cloud security, and we also, the enterprise is embracing open source technologies. And so we've recently added an addition to the portfolio to help you manage open source database and streaming technologies. So we're paying attention to what applications, to trends for cloud applications, and we're growing the portfolio to address the needs that are, top of mind for those customers.
Engineers often find cost optimization, time consuming and painful, but we're coming into an economic period where a lot of companies are looking at their, tightening their belts and so forth and looking at ways they can cut costs. How does Spot by NetApp make it easier to get more bang for your buck in terms of your cloud spend?
So the flagship product or solution of the Spot by NetApp portfolio is the Elastic Root solution. And this is really at the heart of optimizing for cloud infrastructure. So, cloud has these different charge models, and Elastic Group takes advantage of utilizing excess capacity and helping by tying in the automation required to respond to replacement of excess capacity if it happens during your application uptime. And it has really good auto scaling capabilities. And so this is one really simple way. It's very easy to use, that can help you get the most bang for your buck out of the cloud. And then the other products layered on top of that, like Spot Ocean, that will help you load balance and be very cost efficient for your Kubernetes-based applications. And then we have visibility into what your spend looks like. And as I mentioned, we have our InstaCluster, our latest edition, which will manage your open source based databases for you. You can provision and configure your open source database clusters, and InstaCluster will take care of the management for you, as well as for Kafka streaming. We have Spot security. We have lots of automation goodness coming that, again, makes the burden of the work and tasks that are required to operate in the cloud easier for your DevOps and SREs. And it's all in one place, right? We provide all of these services and offerings in a centralized way. So we're really paying attention to who our end user is and growing and innovative in key ways.
You mentioned that provides visibility into the spend. Are there dashboards so you can see that in real time, or is it?
Understanding your spend in a dashboard with just the cloud native tools can be cumbersome because you have to look in so many different places. So we do have Cloud Checker that gives you kind of a single pane of glass. I know you love that term.
We love it here. we very much love that term.
But yeah, it gives you visibility across your clouds. So it helps you, to get a holistic view of what your spend is. And that's really important, especially if you have a multi-cloud environment. Sometimes it can be challenging to normalize and make sense of your budgets and your spend. And so that's a really useful view that the Spot portfolio provides. And then the Spot Elastic Group dashboard is really good too, because it shows you in real time at all times how much you're actually saving, and who does not want to see that?
That's true. It's something you can information you can share with your bosses and the people in the C-suite and so on.
Yes. I have so many screenshots of my Elastic Group dashboard stored so that I can pop them up and brag.
That's cool. Is there anything else about this whole issue of cloud ops and that you feel that we didn't cover, that you feel is important for our listeners to know?
Well, I do, because InstaCluster is our latest edition, I do want to add one aspect that maybe we didn't talk about so much, but in the spirit of offloading DevOps and SREs, where cloud is innovating at lightning speed. I mean, tech is always innovating really quickly, but cloud and Kubernetes have advanced things, they have advanced innovation in such a way that we have to do a lot of work to keep up. And so products like InstaCluster that help manage open source technologies go a long way in keeping the burden of filling the talent and skill gap down. So your DevOps and SREs can focus on their tasks and their jobs without having to constantly learn new skills and feel like they have to learn all the stuff and know all the stuff. While it's fun to do that in your spare time, or if you just want to wonk out sometimes, that's great. But the pressure to have to do it, to keep your job is something that I think contributes to burnout. And so, so this is a space that I expect to see grow, in particular in the DevOps space, because the tools matrix of DevOps tools available is so vast. And so anything that we can do to streamline and standardize and automate and keep things, workable and functional for our DevOps and SRE heroes, I think will go a long way.
Thank you very much for joining us today, Mekka. This is I just want to thank Mekka Williams from Spot by NetApp for joining us for this conversation. And I'd like to thank our friends at Spot by NetApp for sponsoring this episode. And I'd like to thank all of you for joining us for this episode of the New Stack Makers. See you next time.
If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're on all the major social media platforms. You can always find us at thenewstack.io. We hope to see you soon.